6 months. That's how long the noise got louder than the truth. 6 months of whispers, 6 months of doubt, 6 months of people quietly deciding a story was already over. Not because Caitlin Clark couldn't shoot anymore, not because she forgot how to play, but because her body had betrayed her. Again. Quad strain, another quad setback, a groin tear that stole months, then an ankle bone bruise just when momentum tried to return. This is the part fans don't see. The 2 a.m. ceiling stairs, the rehab rooms that smell like disappointment, the fear that creeps in after the 4th injury. When you start asking a question athletes are terrified to voice. What if the best version of me already happened? And then December arrived. USA basketball training camp. Closed doors, no cameras, no sympathy. Because this wasn't a comeback tour. This was a verdict. Every eye in that gym wasn't cheering for her. They were hunting, watching for hesitation, that half-second delay, that subconscious flinch when an injured body remembers pain. The medical staff had clipboards ready, not to applaud makes, to track micro-movements, how she planted, how she cut, how she absorbed contact. Because groin injuries don't lie. They steal lateral explosion. Ankles change how you land. One awkward step, just one, and every opponent would smell blood. Everyone in that gym knew it. This wasn't practice. This was Caitlin Clark auditioning for her future. Warm-ups began. Shots, light movement, nothing dramatic. And then something subtle happened. Not loud, not flashy, but enough to freeze conversations mid-sentence. Her body wasn't just moving, it was moving differently. Looser, sharper, more intentional. Cuts were decisive, landings were clean, balance looked rebuilt. And then she drifted to the wing. No rush, no hesitation, pulled from deep, pure. Another rep, same result. That's when a veteran stopped talking. Because the move everyone feared, the step back, was there. The timing, the footwork, the release, automatic. And in that moment, the question inside that gym quietly changed. It wasn't, is she healthy? It became, what did she do while she was gone? Because whatever Caitlin Clark did first when she returned, it wasn't just a shot, it was a message. And the people who understood basketball the deepest felt it immediately. The first real reaction didn't come from a coach. It came from across the floor. A conversation stopped mid-sentence, a laugh cut off short. Because when Sue Bird locks onto something, people notice. Bird has seen everything. Olympic golds, WNBA championships, generations rise and fall. She's watched comebacks that inspired and returns that ended careers. So when she stopped, eyes narrowed, staring through warm-ups, it mattered. What caught her wasn't the shot, it was the movement before it. Caitlin Clark planted her left foot and slid laterally. No hitch, no protective step, no hesitation. Groin injuries steal that first, always. But Clark's hips stayed level, her core stayed quiet, her balance never drifted. Bird leaned toward a coach and said something under her breath. The coach didn't answer, because he was seeing it too. This wasn't an athlete trying to survive camp. This was an athlete who rebuilt herself with purpose. As drills intensified, defenders picked up pressure, bumps on cuts, hands checking hips, bodies testing limits. Clark absorbed it, then she accelerated, not with speed, with timing. She waited an extra beat, let defenders lean, then exploded through space that didn't exist a second earlier. And suddenly the evaluation flipped. The medical staff stopped writing. They started watching, because the injury they feared most wasn't showing up. No compensation, no altered mechanics. If anything, she looked stronger. But here's where it got uncomfortable. As scrimmage reps began, Caitlin didn't defer. She called sets. Not loudly, not defiantly, casually, like someone who already knew the reads. And teammates responded. Ball swung faster, spacing opened, defenders hesitated. That's when the coaches realized something dangerous. She wasn't just back, she was ahead. Because the version of Caitlin Clark who left with injuries was a scorer fighting defenses. The version who returned, she was controlling them. One assistant later said she was seeing 2 steps ahead and moving like her body trusted her again. That's the scary part, when confidence returns before fear does. By the end of that session, the question had evolved again. It wasn't about durability anymore. It was about impact. Because if Caitlin Clark could move like this now, what would she look like once the rust was gone? And more importantly, what decision would Team USA be forced to make if this version showed up in full scrimmage? That answer came sooner than anyone expected. The first full scrimmage is where careers change. Not publicly, not on highlight reels, but in the quiet moments coaches never forget. 5-on-5, game speed, no easing in. This is where injured players usually reveal themselves. A step late on defense, a rush shot under pressure, a hesitation they don't even feel, but everyone else sees. Caitlin Clark showed none of it. First possession, she didn't shoot. She read the floor, pulled a defender 2 steps too far, and fired a pass that hit a cutter in stride. Easy bucket. Second possession, high pick and roll. Defense went under. She didn't rush it. One dribble, reset her feet, pulled from deep, nothing but net. The bench went quiet. Not impressed quiet, concerned quiet, because the shot wasn't forced. It wasn't emotional. It was available. That's when defenders started pressing, full court, bodying her on cuts, testing the ankle, testing the groin. And here's where the gym shifted. Caitlin leaned into contact, not recklessly, intentionally. She let defenders feel her base, her balance, her strength. Then she punished them. A split through 2 defenders, a pull-up off 1 foot, clean. A step back that made someone on the bench exhale loudly. Coaches started standing, clipboards forgotten, because this wasn't just recovery, this was evolution. The injuries had taken something and given something back. Patience, efficiency, control. The pace of the scrimmage started bending around her. Teammates relocated instinctively. Cuts became sharper. Shots came easier. Not because she demanded the ball, but because she dictated gravity. And then came the moment that forced the conversation. Late in the scrimmage, shot clock winding down, a veteran waved her off, wanted isolation. Caitlin didn't argue. She slid to the corner. The play stalled. Defense collapsed. Turnover. Next possession, Caitlin jogged the ball up, called the set herself. Same alignment, different timing. 2 passes, defender late. 3, automatic. No celebration. She just pointed back on defense. That's when the head coach turned to the staff, not excited, serious, because the decision they'd been avoiding was no longer theoretical. If this version of Caitlin Clark was real, if her body was stable and her mind was sharper, then Team USA wasn't just getting a player back. They were getting a different kind of problem, one that changed rotations, changed roles, changed how the team would have to play. And that's when the question stopped being about her health. It became about what she did first that made everything else inevitable. Because it wasn't the shot, it was the control. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. What Caitlin Clark did first wasn't flashy. That's why it scared people. She didn't try to prove she was the same player. She proved she was a smarter one. In the next session, coaches adjusted. Tighter rotations, more physical defenders, complex coverages designed to force mistakes. This was the stress test. Most players coming off injuries chase reassurance. They force shots to feel normal again. Caitlin did the opposite. She slowed everything down. She passed up good shots for great ones. She dragged defenders into decisions they didn't want to make. She used the threat of her shooting to control space instead of constantly taking it. And that's when something subtle happened. Veterans started asking her questions. Not out loud, not dramatically. Little glances, quick nods. Where do you want it? Same set again? That never happens by accident. Because leadership in basketball doesn't get announced, it emerges. One assistant later said, "She didn't come back trying to reclaim her spot. She came back redefining it." And that forced a problem Team USA wasn't prepared for. Because the original plan was simple: ease her back in, limit minutes, see how the body responds. But now, the offense functioned better with her initiating. The pace was cleaner, the decision-making sharper. Even defensively, her positioning was better. Less gambling, better anticipation. That's when the medical staff delivered their report. No red flags, no compensation patterns, no hesitation in lateral movement. In other words, she wasn't surviving camp. She was ready. That's when the real conversation began behind closed doors. Not, can Caitlin Clark help us? But, How do we play if she's this version now? Because this wasn't Iowa Caitlin. This wasn't pre-injury Caitlin. This was a player who had been forced to sit, watch, study, and rebuild. And players like that don't come back the same. They come back dangerous. By the end of the week, the staff stopped talking about restrictions. They started talking about lineups and roles and minutes that used to belong to someone else. That's when the shockwave quietly started spreading through the gym because everyone could feel it. A decision was coming. Not because Caitlin demanded it, but because what she did first, taking control without forcing anything, made it impossible to pretend this was just a feel-good return. And the final proof? That came in the last scrimmage, when everything was on the line, and Caitlin Clark made one read that ended all debate. The last scrimmage wasn't loud. No trash talk, no theatrics, just intensity, because everyone in that gym knew what it represented. This was the final evaluation. Lineups tightened, minutes mattered, mistakes lingered longer. Caitlin Clark checked in early. No hesitation, no testing. First possession, she didn't touch the ball. Second possession, she waved off a screen, let the defense shift. Then she attacked the space it left behind. Layup, next trip down, defense trapped. She split it without forcing speed. Kick out, 3. What shocked everyone wasn't the execution, it was the calm. The injuries didn't live in her anymore. They weren't in her cuts. They weren't in her landings. They weren't in her decisions. They were gone. And then came the read. Late in the scrimmage, tie game, shot clock bleeding. A defender overplayed the wing. Most players take the shot. Caitlin didn't. She fired a bounce pass to a cutter nobody else saw. Bucket, whistle, game. The bench erupted, but not emotionally, relieved, because the uncertainty was over. The coaches didn't huddle to debate. They nodded. They'd seen enough. This wasn't a comeback story. This was a return with authority. Caitlin Clark didn't prove she was healthy. She proved she was better, smarter, more controlled, more dangerous. And the things she did first, before the shots, before the highlights, she trusted her body completely. Once that happened, everything else followed. Team USA didn't just get a star back. They got a player who had survived doubt, injury, and silence, and came back transformed. That's why people were shocked. Not because she returned, but because of how she returned.